Ethan Graves had spent weeks in the shadows, slipping through the cracks of a world that wanted him erased. No digital footprint, no safe houses left, no allies he could trust. And yet, they still found him. A plain envelope sat on the wooden table of his rented cabin, its paper crisp, untouched. Except for the man who had left it there, Ethan hadn't heard the intruder come or go. That alone told him everything. He unfolded the note, its message short, precise, a challenge. No more running, no more games. Meet me, let's talk. A location, a time. No threats, no ultimatums. That's what made it more dangerous. The syndicate didn't need to chase him anymore. They wanted him to come willingly. Ethan's fingers curled around the note, his mind working through every possible trap. And then he smiled. They thought they had control. They were wrong. 12 hours later, Ethan walked into the belly of the beast. The meeting spot wasn't in a high-rise office or a government safe house. It was a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of the city. Public, open. A place where killers didn't make messes. Smart. Ethan stepped inside, eyes sweeping the room, calculating exits, angles, threats. At the back, a table for two. A man in a dark suit. Calm. Patient. Waiting for him, Ethan took his time walking over, settling into the chair across from the stranger. "Ethan," the man greeted smoothly. No last names, no titles, just an easy confidence. Like this was a conversation. Between old friends, Ethan leaned back. "You're not what I expected." The man smirked. "Neither are you." A waiter arrived, poured a glass of whiskey. Ethan didn't touch it. The man folded his hands. "I assume you know why you're here." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, but I'm waiting to hear you say it." The man chuckled, amused. He liked this game. "You're not an enemy, Ethan. You're an opportunity." A pause. "You think you've been hunting us?" the man continued. "But the truth?" He tilted his head. "We've been watching you." Ethan didn't blink. He had expected this. But hearing it? That was different. "You survived everything we threw at you?" the man said. "You didn't just escape. You adapted." He took a slow sip of whiskey. "Now, we're offering you something better." Ethan held his gaze. "Let me guess," he said. "I work for you, or I die." The man smirked. "No, Ethan, that would be too predictable." He leaned forward. "You don't have to die." A pause. "You just have to disappear." Ethan's jaw tightened. They weren't forcing him into a corner. They were giving him a choice, the most dangerous kind. Ethan let the silence stretch, making them wait, making them wonder. Then finally, he smiled. "All right," he said. "Let's talk." But what the syndicate didn't know, they weren't recruiting him. He was playing them. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. Ethan Graves had spent his career hunting ghosts, fugitives who vanished, names erased, identities buried. But tonight, the ghost wasn't someone he was chasing. It was someone waiting for him, the syndicate's meeting. Room was colder than he expected, not in temperature but in design. Nothing personal, nothing wasted, a space that existed only for business. And at the head of the long, dark table, a man Ethan hadn't seen in over a decade. His chest tightened. His pulse didn't, because he knew that face, knew it better than anyone. Jack Mercer, his former commanding officer, his mentor, the man who had taught him everything he knew. Ethan's jaw clenched. This wasn't possible. Mercer had been declared dead 6 years ago, killed in action. A funeral, a flag-draped coffin, all of it a lie. And yet, there he was, alive, in a suit, sitting at the table like a king on his throne. Mercer smirked. "You look like you've seen a ghost, son." Ethan didn't sit, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Mercer gestured to the empty chair. "Come on, have a seat." Ethan's voice came out flat, controlled. "You're dead." Mercer chuckled. "I was." He spread his arms. "And now? I'm something else." Ethan's mind worked fast. The syndicate wasn't just an organization, it was a machine. And Mercer? He had been one of its architects. Ethan finally spoke. Low, cold, "You set me up." Mercer exhaled through his nose, nodding. That's fair. No excuses. No lies. Just confirmation. Why? Ethan demanded. Mercer leaned back. Because we knew what you were capable of, and we wanted to see if you'd prove us right. Ethan clenched his fists. You used me. Mercer tilted his head. No, son. We made you. The words landed like a hammer. Ethan's breath came slow and steady. But inside, a war was raging. Every mission, every decision, every near-death escape, had it all been part of their game? Mercer studied him. You think you've been fighting us? But every move you made? Every obstacle we threw in your way? He smirked. You passed. Ethan stayed silent. Because deep down, he already knew. Mercer stood, walking around the table, hands in his pockets, calm, casual, dangerous. You're not like the others, he said. Most men crack under pressure. You don't? Most men hesitate. You adapt. Mercer stopped beside him. That's why we chose you. Ethan's jaw tightened. Mercer's voice softened. You don't have to fight us anymore, son. A pause. This was never about making you lose. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. It was about proving you belong. Ethan stared at him, and for the first time in his life, he didn't know what his next move was. Ethan Graves had spent his life chasing criminals, shutting down syndicates, dismantling corrupt organizations piece by piece. But nothing he had faced, not the cartels, not the warlords, not the dirty politicians, came close to this. Because this time, he wasn't fighting the syndicate. They were offering him a seat at the table. He sat across from Jack Mercer, his former mentor, the man he had once trusted with his life. Now the mastermind behind the syndicate. The room was quiet. Too quiet. A game was being played here, one Ethan wasn't supposed to win. Mercer leaned forward, eyes calm, calculating. Tell me, Ethan, what do you think we do? Ethan didn't answer. Mercer smirked. You think we're just another criminal enterprise? A glorified cartel? He shook his head. We don't just pull strings in law enforcement, Ethan. We don't just buy politicians. He tapped the table. We decide. Wars. Ethan exhaled slowly. The weight of those words settled like a storm. We decide which economies thrive and which collapse, Mercer continued. Which countries stabilize and which fall into chaos. He folded his hands. We don't chase power, Ethan. We are power. Ethan leaned back. Sounds like a great sales pitch. Mercer chuckled. It's not a pitch. A pause. It's an offer. Ethan's jaw tightened. Mercer's voice softened. We don't want you dead, Ethan. We want you to lead. Silence stretched. Mercer studied him. Think about it. Every mission you ran, every fugitive you brought down, you were doing the work anyway. But for the wrong side. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink, because deep down he knew Mercer was right about one thing. The system Ethan had spent years defending? It had been rigged from the start. Ethan exhaled. And if I say no? Mercer's expression didn't change. But the air in the room shifted. You know the answer to that, Mercer said quietly. The screen behind him flickered to life. Images appeared. Faces. People Ethan had known. People he had cared about. Jessica Hale, Wren, Caleb, even the old bartender in Chicago who once patched him up after a knife fight. Mercer leaned back. You think we don't know where they are? Ethan's fingers curled into fists. This isn't a threat, son, Mercer said. It's a fact. A pause. If you refuse, they don't just die. Mercer's voice was calm. Too calm. They disappear, like they never existed. Ethan's pulse remained steady, but his mind was racing. He had two choices: join the syndicate, or let them erase everyone he ever gave a damn about, and for the first time in his life. He didn't see a way out. Ethan Graves had spent years studying his enemies, learning their weaknesses, anticipating their moves before they even made them. Now, for the first time, he was inside the belly of the beast. And instead of fighting back, he played along. He leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable, as Jack Mercer, the former mentor turned syndicate mastermind, watched him closely. "So," Mercer said, voice smooth, controlled. "Do we have a deal?" Ethan exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw like a man considering his options. He let the silence stretch, made them wait. Then finally, he nodded. "I'll need time," he said. "If I'm going to be part of this, I need to understand how things work." Mercer's lips curled into a knowing smirk. He thought he had won. Ethan let him believe it. But what Mercer didn't know, Ethan had already started his war. Over the next few days, Ethan was given access. Not everything, not yet, but enough to see how deep the syndicate's control ran. They didn't rule with money or brute force. They ruled with information. They had files on everyone, judges, senators, foreign leaders, even ranking intelligence officers, and those who refused to cooperate, they were erased. Ethan watched as encrypted messages were sent out. Orders that could topple businesses, ruin careers, start wars. Everything revolved around fear. And fear was something Ethan could use. Ethan started small, a single email. A slight adjustment to a report, a planted whisper in the right ear. He wasn't trying to blow up the syndicate. Not yet. He was making them doubt each other. First, he fed false intel to two high-ranking syndicate operatives, both powerful, both ambitious. One was told the other was embezzling syndicate funds. The other was given a file suggesting the first was selling information to a foreign intelligence agency. Neither accusation was true, but it didn't have to be, because the syndicate was built on control, and when powerful men feel like they're losing control, they start making mistakes. The cracks spread faster than Ethan expected. A deal in Eastern Europe collapsed overnight. One faction blaming another. A high-ranking syndicate handler disappeared. No one knew if he ran or was taken out. Paranoia took root. And paranoia was a virus. Ethan moved carefully, never doing too much at once. Just enough. Enough to make the right people ask the wrong questions. Enough to make them turn on each other. Ethan had expected it to take weeks before Mercer noticed. It took 5 days. Mercer called him into his office, standing by the window, hands in his pockets. "Something interesting is happening, Ethan," he said casually. Ethan kept his expression neutral. "Yeah?" Mercer turned, studying him. "You wouldn't happen to know why half my division heads are suddenly at each other's throats, would you?" Ethan shrugged. "Maybe they finally realize this business model is built on eating its own." Mercer chuckled. "You've got jokes." Silence. Then Mercer's eyes sharpened. "I hope, for your sake, that's all you've got." Ethan held his gaze. Didn't blink, because the war had begun, and Mercer didn't even know he'd already lost. The syndicate was crumbling. Not all at once, not in fire and explosions, but in silence. Ethan's sabotage had worked its way through the organization like a slow-burning fuse. Factions turned on each other. Trust shattered. Alliances dissolved overnight. Operations stalled. Accounts were frozen. And for the first time in years, the untouchable syndicate was on the brink of collapse. But Ethan knew better than to celebrate, because the most dangerous enemy was a desperate one. Ethan moved carefully through the syndicate's compound, staying in the shadows. His plan wasn't finished yet. One more piece had to fall into place. That's when he saw her. Jessica Hale, standing in a dimly lit hallway waiting for him. His grip tightened on his gun. She didn't flinch. "We don't have time for this," she said, voice low. "Mercer knows what you're doing. He's cleaning house." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And you?" Jessica exhaled. "I was never working for them, Ethan." He narrowed his eyes. She stepped closer. "You really think I'd betray you?" Her voice was sharp now. "They had a gun to my head, Ethan. To all of us." Silence stretched between them. Ethan's instinct screamed at him not to trust her. But if she was lying, why was she warning him? Finally he nodded. "Then, help me finish this." The syndicate wasn't going down without a fight. Mercer had called. A meeting. A last-ditch effort to regain control. Ethan knew the only way to end this was to force them into one place. One final confrontation. Jessica got him into the boardroom. Past the guards. past the security. When Ethan stepped inside, he saw them, the last of the syndicate's leaders, and at the head of the table, Jack Mercer. The room went silent. Ethan didn't sit. "This ends tonight," he said. Mercer tilted his head. "You really think you've won?" Ethan smirked. "No, I think you've already lost." And then the lights cut out. Chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouts, the sound of an empire collapsing. Ethan moved fast, Jessica at his side, Mercer trying to escape. They fought through the compound, every second bringing them closer to the final confrontation. Ethan found Mercer in the underground garage, trying to disappear into the night. Not this time. Ethan leveled his gun. "No!" More running. Mercer exhaled, then smirked. "You still don't get it, do you?" A pause. "This was never about us." Ethan frowned. Mercer took a slow step forward. "You think taking me down ends this?" He chuckled. "The syndicate isn't an organization, Ethan." His eyes darkened. "It's a system." Ethan hesitated. And in that moment, Mercer made his move. The air in the boardroom was thick with tension. Ethan Graves stood at the head of the table, his gun steady, his eyes locked onto Jack Mercer, his former mentor, now the mastermind behind the syndicate. Around them, the last of Mercer's lieutenants were frozen in place, hands hovering over holsters, waiting for the moment this all went to hell. Ethan wasn't here to fight. Not yet. He reached into his jacket, slow, deliberate, and pulled out a small device, a satellite, uplink. The blue LED light blinked. "Live transmission." "Every word you've said," Ethan murmured, "has been recorded." Mercer's face didn't change. Ethan tossed the device onto the table. "Every crime, every deal, every dirty cop and politician you've got in your pocket." He met Mercer's gaze. "It's all being uploaded to multiple secure locations as we speak." Silence. Then Mercer smiled and he laughed. A slow, calculated chuckle that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "You really think that matters?" Mercer said, shaking his head. "You think I'm afraid of exposure?" Ethan's grip tightened on his gun. This wasn't the reaction he expected. Mercer leaned back, completely unfazed. "The people who run the world don't fear the truth, Ethan. They own it." A pause. "Go ahead. Release it." He smirked. "See what happens." Ethan's stomach twisted, because for the first time tonight, he wasn't sure he had won. The syndicate lieutenants shifted in their seats. Guns were drawn. No one spoke. No one moved. Ethan scanned the room, his mind calculating every possible exit. None of them were good. Mercer sighed. "You're a smart man, Ethan, but you're thinking too small. Governments, intelligence agencies, entire economies, they don't function without us." Ethan clenched his jaw. "All you've done," Mercer continued, "is make yourself the single most hunted man in the world." Jessica tensed beside Ethan, her hand hovering over her weapon. They had walked straight into a trap, and Mercer knew it. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Maybe." He took a step back. Mercer raised an eyebrow. "Running already?" Ethan smirked. "No, just making sure you don't see it coming." Then he moved. Ethan Graves had been in enough standoffs to know when a fight was already lost. And this? This was a slaughter waiting to happen. Jack Mercer sat at the head of the syndicate's war room, completely at ease. Around him, his lieutenants held their weapons low but ready, waiting for the signal to put a bullet in Ethan's skull. But Ethan wasn't sweating, because unlike them, he knew how this was going to end. He just needed to let them think they had already won. "You think this is checkmate," Mercer said, voice dripping with amusement. "But let me tell you a secret, son. There is no checkmate in a game you never controlled." Ethan smirked. He had been waiting for that line. "That's funny," he said, tilting his head, "because I was about to tell you the same thing." Mercer's eyes flickered with something. Hesitation. The smallest crack in his confidence. And that's when Ethan moved. He reached into his pocket, pressed a button on his watch. Somewhere in the city, an explosion rocked a syndicate safe house, then another, and another. One by one, the syndicate's offshore accounts were wiped, their encrypted files leaked, their hidden fortresses burned to the ground. Mercer's smirk vanished. Ethan stepped forward. You thought I walked into this blind? His voice was low. Dangerous. I've been 3 steps ahead this whole time. Mercer's men hesitated. Doubt. It was a virus, and Ethan had just planted it inside every person in that room. Jessica was the first to react, drawing her gun and stepping closer to Ethan's side. We need to move, she whispered. Now. But Ethan didn't move, because something wasn't right. Mercer exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. Smirking again, Jessica stiffened. And then Mercer spoke. Tell me something, Ethan, he said. Voice calm. How well do you know Caleb? A beat. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Behind him, a gun cocked. He turned just as Caleb Vance, his oldest ally, his most trusted partner, leveled a gun at his back. Jessica froze. No! A single shot rang out. Jessica staggered, eyes wide, blood blooming from her side. Caleb turned the gun on Ethan. Sorry, brother, he murmured. It was always going to end this way. Everything snapped into place. Caleb had never been on Ethan's side. He had been Mercer's failsafe. Ethan had seen 1,000 betrayals in his time. But this one hurt. Ethan clenched his jaw, eyes flicking toward Jessica, still alive but barely standing. He looked back at Caleb. Last chance. Ethan, said voice low. Final. Caleb shook his head. Ethan moved first. 2 shots. 1 target. And just like that, the syndicate began to fall. Smoke curled in the air, thick with the scent of gunpowder and blood. The boardroom, once the heart of the syndicate's power, was now a battlefield. Bodies littered the floor. Mercers, lieutenants, security personnel, the ones who had thought they were untouchable. But the real fight wasn't over. Ethan Graves stood in the center of it all, gun in hand, barely holding himself up. His ribs screamed, his vision blurred, and the deep gash along his side was bleeding out fast. Across from him, Jack Mercer leaned against the table, his own blood pooling beneath him. And yet, he was still smiling. You think you won? Mercer's voice was weak, but his amusement remained. Ethan didn't answer. He just stared, his breathing ragged. Mercer coughed, blood on his lips, then leaned forward. You didn't stop us, he whispered. A beat. You only delayed the inevitable. Ethan clenched his jaw, because deep down, he knew Mercer was right. The syndicate wasn't just a man. It wasn't even an organization. It was a system. And systems didn't die overnight. Ethan exhaled, stepping closer. He raised his gun. Mercer didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't plead. He just smirked. Ethan pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed, and then there was only silence. Ethan didn't wait to watch Mercer's body fall. He turned, pressing a hand against his wound as he stumbled toward Jessica. She was still alive. Barely. Can you move? Ethan asked. Jessica gritted her teeth. Not well. Ethan nodded, slinging her arm over his shoulder. They stepped over the wreckage of the syndicate's elite, past the men and women who had once ruled the world. From the shadows now. They were just another part of history. Or at least, that's what Ethan hoped. By the time they reached the safe house, Ethan could barely stay on his feet. Jessica collapsed onto the couch, pressing a hand to her bandaged wound. Ethan stood at the window, staring at the city below. Where do we go from here? Jessica's voice was quiet. Ethan didn't answer, because he knew the truth. The syndicate had fallen, but it wasn't gone. Others would rise to take Mercer's place. The machine would rebuild itself. And Ethan? He could run, hide, try to live some kind of life, or he could disappear. For real this time. Jessica sighed. You're leaving, aren't you? Ethan glanced at her. I have to. She nodded as if she had already known the answer. Then don't look back. He didn't. Days later, Ethan Graves was a ghost. No credit cards, no phone signals, no trace that he had ever existed. But the world wasn't done with him yet. A package arrived at a remote drop point, one only a handful of people could have known about. Inside, a burner phone. It rang the moment he picked it up. Ethan didn't speak, but the voice on the other end did. You won the battle? A pause. But the war has just begun. Ethan exhaled slowly. And then, he smiled. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.